Prime Minister, John Key.
Rob, thanks very much. It's great to be here as part of the countdown process for Global Entrepreneurship Week. Can I acknowledge George Ferguson as the British High Commissioner, Bob Harvey as the Mayor of Waitaki City, my parliamentary colleague, Nikki Kay, Greg Richard as the Dean here at the Business School, and of course Sam Morgan as the mascot. So I suppose there's a few messages I would have. The first of them is that entrepreneurship is extremely important. If New Zealand is going to do well and be successful, then in the end we're going to create good ideas and the brain power and the enthusiasm of entrepreneurs in New Zealand to building a much stronger country and one where we can compete internationally. The second thing is I think that the government can play a role in entrepreneurship. Sometimes in funding, and we do that through universities and things where we put in money, or it can be through the VIV fund, for instance, where we make sure that there's finance there available. But a lot of it can be just in the actions that we take and the encouragement that we give and the fact that we want to develop a set of regulations and rules and legislation which encourages people to be entrepreneurs. So I think the government can play an important role, and we need to play a very important role. Third thing I think we can draw a pretty rapid conclusion to is that New Zealand is very successful at entrepreneurship. Actually, we've come up with some great ideas and by and large converted them. I think the one thing that I would point out is that it's good that this is a global challenge and a global week, and the reason why I say that is because I can't tell you what the business model of the future looks like, but I can be sure that it's going to involve change. And it will almost certainly involve the cooperation of New Zealand entrepreneurs with companies overseas. One of the big things that's going to change and help New Zealand, in my view, has been the internet. It's one of the reasons why we're backing $1.5 billion into ultra-fast broadband and fibre to the home. Because New Zealand has always suffered from the tyranny of distance. We're a long way away from markets, and it's really expensive to get to international customers, and they now total 6.5 billion people. So if we can use our entrepreneurial power and link that to the power of the internet, then I think we can be very successful as a country. And secondly, I think you will see us really starting to team up. I remember on the election campaign in 2008, I went down to Christchurch, and there was a little company with a couple of guys there that came up to a function I was speaking at, and I said, what's the name of your company? And they said, Polar Bear Farm. And I said, what do you do? And they said, oh, well, we've worked out how to run a video application on an iPhone. That was their thing. And they said, in fact, we need fibre because we're trying to host this thing. There's just too many hits and we can't actually keep it in New Zealand. But nevertheless, here was a bunch of young New Zealand entrepreneurs who came up with a really clever idea that was adopted by an international company. And that is just an example of how entrepreneurship is going to work. So I think we should be enthused by that and by what we see. I think inevitably with entrepreneurship you'll see some successes and probably lots of failure. That is a function of what you're dealing with. Not everything is going to work, not every business will be successful, not everyone will have a great experience, but along the way a lot of people will, and it will develop the kind of country that we want. And I think that Sam touched on it actually, that New Zealand is a country of generalists, not specialists. I certainly noticed that when I worked for Merrill Lynch. Huge US firm, a lot of people that were very good at one specific thing, but not necessarily good at thinking broadly and laterally and creatively. They're just not always used to that kind of outcome, and we have that in New Zealand. So I think if we get in behind this kind of activity, if we support our companies, if we encourage people to give it a go, and accept that for all of the successes there's also going to be some failure, then I think New Zealand's really well positioned to do well when it comes to entrepreneurship. And if you look at the future of New Zealand, in my view, it's going to be very much around the areas that we have a competitive advantage. And one of those is that we produce food the world wants to buy. Another one happens to be, this is a great place to educate people, and you can see this at Auckland University and the kind of international demand that you're seeing. It certainly will be in the area of tourism where the world wants to travel. But I suspect the area that might be the most exciting and arguably may even deliver the biggest change is in that area of budding young companies that create the ideas that we haven't even thought of today to solve the problems that we're not even sure we've currently got, but if we could have a solution to, we would very much enjoy. And that's where entrepreneurialism and the creativity that comes from that sector is important. It also, I think, matches with one final ingredient that New Zealand has, and that is we're a great place to live. You know, by and large, our weather is good, we're geographically safe, our food is fantastic, and so what a country to house the sorts of people that are creative and that can develop ideas, that can employ people. And what we've got to make sure is that New Zealand is internationally competitive. That people will come here, that they will bring their capital and ideas, and from that we can grow. And that really just raises the one last point, and that is that when people are successful, overwhelmingly successful in entrepreneurship, in my experience, you see them doing lots of other things. And at the risk of embarrassing the mascot, he's a great example of that, where he's been outrageously successful in his own business and is now engaged with a lot of other things. You saw exactly the same thing with Stephen Tyndall, where again, through all of his efforts, he's really starting to get out there and help others create businesses and ideas that they can take to fruition. So we need successful entrepreneurs in New Zealand. We need to celebrate them, and we need to make sure that we're proud of them, because from their activities, a whole lot of other entrepreneurs will get to have a go, and I think that's an important part of the sort of culture we have in New Zealand. So thank you for inviting me for the countdown, and for those that are involved, have a great week.